Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Nature Connects. This is the Nature Conservancy in Massachusetts webinar series that connects you with science, nature experts, and influencers from New England and around the world. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Lauren Dowd, your host, and I'm really excited that we'll be hearing from Tracey Williams, Northwest Territories Conservation Lead for the Nature Conservancy's Canada program. She'll be sharing the story of how TNC helped the protection of Thaidene Nëné become a reality by providing support to the Łutsël Dene First Nation. In 2019, after decades of effort, 6.5 million acres of the Łutsël Dene First Nations homeland were officially protected in a historic agreement between the First Nation, the Government of the Northwest Territories, and Parks Canada. Thaidene Nëné translates as Land of the Ancestors in the Dene language. To give you a sense of scale, the newly protected landscape is equal to the combined size of the Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, Glacier, Redwood, Zion, Arches, Shenandoah, Everglades, and Acadia National Parks here in the United States. There, carbon-rich boreal forest meets barren tundra, a zone that will be vital to the preservation of species like bears, lynx, and caribou as the climate changes. But I don't want to give away too much, so I'll leave the rest of the story for Tracey to tell. Before we get started with her presentation, I would like to acknowledge that we're speaking to you today from a number of native lands. Those of us from the Massachusetts team are based on the traditional lands and territory of the Massachusetts and Pawtucket, although personally, I'm currently working from Hawaii on the traditional territory of the Kanaka-Uivi. I want to pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging who have stewarded these lands throughout the generations. As we talk today about our partnership with the Łutsël Dene First Nation, I encourage all of you to learn more about the history and people of the places where you currently live and work. And so with that, I'll now turn it over to Tracey. Thank you for being with us. Oh, I think you're on mute, Tracey.
Am I unmuted now? Okay, great. Thank you, Lauren, for that introduction. And I'm so pleased to be with you here today. I am coming to you from Acacho Treaty 8 lands, dry geese territory in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, Canada. And this city, this little city, is the present day capital of this Canadian territory, the Northwest Territories. Lauren spoke of how big this protected area, Indigenous protected area is, Thaidene Nëné. But the Northwest Territories is equally large, and it's, just to give you an idea, looking at this slide, the Northwest Territories is 3 times the size of California, and it is truly the beating heart of the Canadian subarctic. It's north of the 60th parallel. So if you draw a line directly north from, say, Bozeman, Montana, it is 2,500 miles or 2,500 kilometers straight north. And you get to Yellowknife. And about 125 kilometers east is Thaidene Nëné Indigenous Protected Area, which is home to some of the deepest waters in North America, the deepest, in fact. And that area is referred to as the east arm of Great Slave Lake. And I may refer to that again while we have this hour together. If you look at that giant lake, which the red dot on this slide demonstrates to you, that eastern part of that lake is the east arm of Great Slave Lake. The majority of the people that live here are indigenous to this place. And I'm going to take you through the next several minutes, or the time that I have to speak with you, about the work that TNC has been doing in Canada with respect to our work in the Northwest Territories, and focus this talk on the relationship we've built with our partners in the creation of Thaidene Nëné Indigenous Protected Area, which is also Canada's 47th National Park. So with that opening, we'd like to show you a short video. It's about 3 minutes long And this was done for the Equator Prize, of which Łutsël Dene First Nation was the recipient of, whose vision Thaidene Nëné actually embodies. So if we could start that video, that would be great.
We were always told, and I can remember as a child, Nihohni, that means watch over the land. The vision of our elders has been to protect the land. They knew, the land needed to sustain us, and they chose the most beautiful area, I believe.
It's a big territory, requires a lot of resources. It requires a recognized law that non-Łutsël Dene will respect. Will make it illegal for them to do any damage to Thaidene Nëné.
I'd like to welcome everybody to Łutsël Dene traditional territory. I'm glad that you all could make it here to witness and be a part of this historical day.
We brought the land, our law, and our way of life, and knowing doing to the table. They brought their law and some financial resources. The Thaidene Nëné Trust that will be owned by the First Nations, the Łutsël Dene First Nations. That gives us real independence. We don't have to go to Canada or the government of Northwest Territories. By having access to the fund, we can bring Indigenousness in the management operations of Thaidene Nëné. Indigenousness, the spiritual, reciprocal relationship we have with the land that most Indigenous people have with their lands and territories across the world. It's the land that gives life to us as a Dene. Gives us a sense of identity, a great sense of responsibility. It will continue to provide that space that we can call home forever. And everybody needs a home in this world.
Thanks for that, Liz. Can everybody hear me?
You're good, Tracey.
Good. Thanks. Thanks again. That video, I hope you all enjoyed it. It gives you a sense of the place, and also just how significant this was for the Łutsël Dene First Nation. And that video mentions that this started about 40 years ago, but really it was 50 years ago. And that started with Parks Canada really intent on making, they had a vision, and their vision was to create the East Arm National Park. And that is what they referred to it as. And their vision was to protect a really iconically beautiful landscape, a pristine ecosystem, a singular beautiful example of where the boreal forest meets the tundra edge. The conservation case had been early made, but it wasn't just about the critical species habitat, but it was also about the archaeological significance, the historical significance, and even then there was a well-known spiritual significance to people, although that did not prominently play in its conservation case. And also, this is an important area for migratory barrenland caribou, and of course, the Dene way of life of the Łutsël Dene First Nation people and their surrounding other Dene people. But these traditional practices and the Dene way of life in 1970 was not going to be a part of this vision of conservation in 1970. Canada, nor really the world, was interested at that time in upholding and acknowledging Indigenous rights to traditional territory in 1970. So it would be more than 30 years before the global enabling conditions, but the Canadian conditions would be in place to establish Thaidene Nëné and understand the vision that the Łutsël Dene First Nation had for their traditional territory. Thaidene Nëné, of course, is the land of the ancestors. That is the translation of Thaidene Nëné into English. And today what we see is Indigenous rights and authority at the center of this Indigenous protected area. After decades of steps towards recognition of treaties and upholding Indigenous sovereignty, Łutsël Dene First Nation saw an opportunity for their vision to be realized and for land protection. And they started to open up talks with Parks Canada around 2000. And a lot of things happened, but an important milestone was made in 2007 when an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, was signed with Parks Canada to formally start to investigate the feasibility of Thaidene Nëné. And a study area of very large, vast area of land, larger than what has been protected today, was put under interim land withdrawal. And that mechanism is meaning no industrial development. So that occurred, and then what unfolded was the ability for the Łutsël Dene to really start to put into modern context what their ancestors had laid down as the sacred, the ethical, the practical foundations for the Dene Soflene way of life to continue. And that, embodiment is really the connection between land and people, water and land, forest and barrens. And to do this, protecting Thaidene Nëné was a critical part of that vision and that sacred foundation. Next slide. During this time, TNC was invited around 2007 to come to the Northwest Territories and support a growing coalition of partners, which were made up of Indigenous governments, federal, territorial, as well as industry and other NGOs, to build a process for community-based conservation initiatives. And we had met, TNC, we had met Łutsël elders and leaders in Anchorage in 2005, in fact, at a World Conservation Congress. And from that point, a slow relationship, if you will, was developed over time. And it was really marked, I believe, by listening to the Łutsël Dene First Nation and beginning to start to prioritize their vision. As I mentioned, the conservation case for this area had been long understood. And so by also listening to their vision, we started to get, a package of what might be a future stewardship of this area. So we brought our donors to visit and meet in their own land, Łutsël Dene First Nation, and learn from them, listen to them. And I think during this time, we began to learn how to extend our knowledge and resonance for a understanding and connection of place. A love of place is embodied in many TNC chapters. And I believe we've come to understand how we could support others with a true sense of and love for land and a connection to that. And so at the center of this is really a deep love of land that the Łutsël Dene First Nation has, and it's connected to the spirit of the people. And I think we recognize this. So rather than pursuing an old and worn path that perhaps was embodied in the 1970 process or engagement or vision of an East Arm National Park, we took the latter and applied our knowledge of, people and place matter, and without them, people and nature cannot thrive. Next slide. So with that, to advance this Thaidene Nëné vision and support this vision that our growing partner had, we started to deploy our skills and expertise where useful to build awareness initially of this vision and our understanding of this permanent protection of Thaidene Nëné, what that would entail. Over the last 10 years, though, our initiative has included a number of things, and that has included science, mapping, GIS work. It was really fundamental to understanding the multiple values of the area. Support for stewardship and monitoring at the First Nation level. What is now referred to as Indigenous guardians. The Łutsël Dene First Nation had a vision of their own, which included the intergenerational transfer of knowledge and skills of their land and the land of the ancestors to their youth. So we have been very involved in supporting those youth components to what they refer to as the Nahatni Dene Rangers Guardian Program. We've helped in communications work, building awareness of the community's ethos. And in 2010, we actually helped to pull together with Łutsël Dene First Nation a trip along the Thaidene River, which is in a beautiful, amazing place in the Central Barrens of the subarctic. On the Barren Lands. And this is another amazing place and a place very important to the Łutsël Dene First Nation, in fact. And it is known as the place where God began. So we did that in 2010 or 2011 rather. We've supported cross-cultural networking and dialogues, having learning exchanges between West Coast First Nation communities there. And last but not least, we've done joint advocacy work to execute the strategic vision that would allow for this establishment of Thaidene Nëné to occur by territorial and federal election times, which happened last fall. And there was many components to that. Of course, having those elections when we did, maybe in hindsight, was a bit of a godsend in terms of now being in the moment of COVID, where everything else is deprioritized to address all the crisis of our times in that. Next slide. I think one of the most significant things that we've been able to support and build a vision for in terms of the pillars of the Łutsël Dene First Nations vision was the long-term sustainability and economic diversification and ability to actually implement, which is now the stage that we are in now, by funding an endowment. And this endowment to the Thaidene Nëné Trust brings the financial capacity with interest income to allow Łutsël to exercise their roles and responsibilities within the framework of the agreements that they have signed as a co-governing partner to Thaidene Nëné Indigenous Protected Area. As the chief negotiator of Łutsël, who you heard on the video, his voice, without funding, there is no park. So we helped LKDFN, or Łutsël Dene First Nation, raise a $30 million endowment. Half of that was raised working in partnership with our donors and with the First Nation. And the other half of that was matched by the federal government of Canada. As I said, this will be protected in the Thaidene Nëné Trust, which is managed by trustees of Łutsël Dene First Nation. And that investment income will really be critical, critical piece to the management and co-governing responsibilities that Łutsël has to steward its land. Next slide. This slide is to show that we did do a bit of advocacy during this journey with Łutsël Dene First Nation, but also that to bring to light that the Łutsël Dene First Nation really made their own history in the creation of Thaidene Nëné Indigenous Protected Area. And in some really very critical steps occurred in January and February of 2019, where the membership of the First Nation went through a very thorough ratification process of their what we call the establishment agreements that underpin the framework, if you will, of the co-governing arrangements of Łutsël's relationship between the territorial and federal governments in the co-governing of this place. That was a successful all membership referendum in February. And the two documents that I referred to, the establishment agreements, were with of course, the government of the Northwest Territories and the government of Canada, as represented by Parks Canada. Next slide. And on Wednesday, August 21st, 2019, Thaidene Nëné was created by these three levels of government, which created the Indigenous Protected Area made up of Canada's 47th National Park Reserve, the territory's first protected area underneath a new law that was created in 2019. And this was the first protected area that utilized that new act. And the coming designation of the wildlife conservation area, the third piece of the designations, which will happen in early 2021. So we're almost complete. And the sum of these parts is Thaidene Nëné Indigenous Protected Area. And this picture is of Chief Daryl Marlowe, who you heard speak in the video. And he's the youngest chief in Łutsël's history. And this to the left is the former Canadian Minister of the Environment and Climate Change, Honorable Catherine McKenna, who was in Łutsël on that historic day. And you can see people are pretty happy. This was a major milestone, not just for our program in TNC, which Thaidene Nëné represents the third largest land protection, permanent protection initiative that we've been involved in our organization's history. But this, this was the result of a decade-long commitment of time and resources. And it involved in some of the largest funders to TNC. And the land of the ancestors is a very large area. It's an area larger than Vermont, and it's 3 times the size of Yellowstone National Park. Next slide. So now that the designations of this Indigenous protected area are nearly complete, the work to truly create the shared governance model of the protected area has really just begun. And we refer to this period of time is what we've entered into is the implementation phase. The agreements that were signed on August 21st, 2019, recognize a nation-to-nation relationship between the GNWT, which is the government of the Northwest Territories, Canada, and the Łutsël Dene First Nation. And that is a big step. And there are things that will have to be done differently on a daily basis in order to make those things real. So Łutsël has already set forth, they hit the ground running. And there has really been an unprecedented period of growth this year, even despite COVID and the complexities of that. One of the guiding things that they have is they completed a 5-year strategic plan, which outlines their goals and many other things. These plans, next slide. These plans also include a purchase and renovation of a lodge that the people of Łutsël are very familiar with because the lodge has sat there for decades and everyone has worked there, and it has become a part of the landscape of their local village. And now they are the owners of that. The Frontier Lodge here in this picture had its first season during COVID, which is not a great time to begin a new business, but they took advantage of what they could and started renovations on masse, and are looking forward to the next season that they can open up and greet visitors of the world to their Indigenous protected area. Next slide. So in addition to the strategic plan that I have just mentioned, Łutsël also developed a caribou management plan, which they also went through a ratification or membership vote on. They are in the process of doing a lot of communications work and building awareness with, of all the protocols, the plans that they hold within that caribou management plan or caribou stewardship plan. Because caribou is, for the Dene people, the Dene way of life. Deep concerns about caribou herds across the Arctic have been perhaps, in the news in Boston and Massachusetts where you are. But that has also been the case in the Northwest Territories. And it's been a consistent and main driver to pursue permanent protection measures for this area. Caribou are no longer reliably returning to the traditional land and water crossings as they once did, but natural fluctuations in herds have been disrupted and exaggerated by global climate change, mineral and energy resource development and extraction, ice roads, past and present big game hunting, disrespectful hunting practices, and other things. And a full vision now realized for Thaidene Nëné will allow for this important area, or very important areas of the caribou range, where multiple herds have been known to cross in times past, will be safeguarded. And Łutsël's plan lays out its own laws and protocols, and it also gives a very clear indication of their own expectations of their watchers of the land or their guardians, and how they will enforce the measures of the plan. Next slide. In fact, Łutsël Dene First Nations Indigenous Guardian Plan program, the Thaidene Nëné, completed its first season of caribou monitoring this year, and there's been a lot of work that they have been doing. They often bring elders out to their work with them. The picture on the right, lower hand corner, was just taken this fall of a new renovation of a cabin on Artillery Lake, which is in Thaidene Nëné, of course. Their job is to really watch, monitor activities on land and water, practice their traditional lifestyle, maintain integrity of the cultural sites, and conduct environmental monitoring. But they're also interacting with visitors to Thaidene Nëné as well. So they will continue to use their caribou plan and bring awareness to that, but they also bring youth into this program as well. And they want the youth to interact with elders like my friend August Enzo in this picture, who have a tremendous wealth of knowledge of their land, and also a deep well of passion and love, as I spoke about before. Right now, going forward, Łutsël Dene First Nation has completed its first season of caribou monitoring, as I said, and they've also have 4 full-time Nahatni rangers, and are building plans going forth as we speak. In fact, next slide. As I mentioned in the last slide, youth is really just a tremendous importance to the future of Thaidene Nëné. TNC has collaborated with local and national partners. Northern Youth Leadership and the Arctic Research Foundation are 2 of those that in the last 2-3 years, we've been working on a pilot program for freshwater youth expeditions on the east arm of Great Slave Lake and other places within the North America's 2nd largest watershed, which is the Mackenzie watershed, of which Great Slave Lake lies in. As I mentioned, it's the deepest source of fresh water at 640 meters in Christie Bay in the East Arm. So here's a picture of 2 Łutsël Dene First Nation young men who were able to go on one of these 1-week expeditions. aboard the Nahidic, which is to the right. And the Nahidic, on board the Nahidic, these youth and other youth from around the lake have had a singular opportunity to work with scientists, hydrographers, technologists, conservationists, professional mariners. And it's been an incredible experience for them to see how a ship like this works, but also to learn directly about the various types of programs going on the ship. So this is just a little window into one of these programs, as they are the next stewards of Thaidene Nëné. Next slide. I hope you've enjoyed this, and maybe it's conjured up a lot of questions, or at least some questions. I'm really very, very pleased to have been with you. Like I said, we are not completely, this is not over. We are in an implementation phase. We have much work to do with Thaidene Nëné still. And my colleagues have told me that a close friend of the Canada program has offered $100,000 match to our conservation priorities across Canada before the calendar year end, and gifts of 1,000 or more will be matched 1-to-1 and will go towards our conservation efforts in places like Thaidene Nëné and across Canada. So if you would like more information on that, I believe in the Zoom link, the chat, there should be some information on that. And I deeply appreciate any support for this. And I deeply appreciate and thank you for your time and interest in Thaidene Nëné Indigenous Protected Area.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tracey. This is such an amazing accomplishment, and I really enjoyed hearing about how it all came together. So now we'll move into the question and answer portion of the webinar. And just as a reminder, if you have a question, please share it using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You can click the button, it will pop up. But to start off, what is the significance of this project for natural climate solutions?
Well, I think the best way of succinctly putting it is this is a tremendous, the area of the Canadian boreal holds an immense amount of carbon. So, the lungs of the planet, it's often been referred to. It's in the, I think it's been 200 billion metric tons. Don't hold me to that, but if somebody wants to correct me on that. But there's an immense amount of carbon. And so we're helping to keep it in the ground with a protection such as Thaidene Nëné. And we have to keep that carbon out of the atmosphere. So that's what one of the greatest things that Thaidene Nëné is offering, and we're going to be able to learn much more about this now that Łutsël has been able to establish the protected area. It's gonna build that platform for research, for more people to be involved, and having that be a focal area with the Łutsël Dene First Nation intricately a part of all of that. And we've got in Canada, our program We have a really important paper that's being peer reviewed at this time on natural climate solutions. And that paper will be a groundbreaking study and for Canada. And I think that's going to be extremely helpful to decision makers to start to parse out, you know, how we continually improve land and water management and restoration activities in Canada. So
that's great. So we've got two questions from the audience here. People asking about what kind of economic development activities will be funded through the endowment.
Well, we'll see. I imagine a lot of the conservation economy, if you will, that will be funded, that will come through the, you know, at least the federal side of the endowment, will be things related to building this conservation economy, the ecotourism, environmental monitoring activities, you know, things related to the Dene way of life, and the continuity of cultural, the cultural continuity, if you will, and the things that are designed, identified, built by Łutsël for Łutsël and others. I can go into that more too. I'm trying not to.
I think that's a great answer.
Yeah.
So we got another one. How can the successes of the global north in this regard inform the challenges of the global south at this critical moment on the planet?
Wow, that's not a hard question at all. Well, I
start
think,
with the hard ones.
Yeah, sure. You know, I think, well, I think you know, somebody, you know, Łutsël just won the International UN Development Programs Prize called the Equator Prize. That's an international prize. This year, I think 600 people. I mean, sorry, 600 communities and initiatives applied for that from 120 different countries. And it's going to be vehicles like that Łutsël has been directly involved in on one half of the coin, to share their story, to engage in dialogue, and the Equator Prize certainly is a rich like cohort, really, of people, small communities, Indigenous people across the globe who are working very hard to find solutions that are built within their understanding of their land and upholding their rights and their self-government to contribute to the stewardship and protection of those lands that they truly love. So it's going to be, you know, that dialogue and learning from each other, and the other dialogues. In Canada, Canada is one of the, you know, signers to the Convention on Biodiversity, Biodiversity. So Canada pays close attention to the targets of the HE targets. And so there's a lot of dialogue that goes on between the 196 countries that signed that, and meeting those targets and goals. There's lots of goals we're behind on in that. So those are two different ways. Hopefully I answered that question.
Yeah, yeah. And so could you also talk a little bit more about how the Łutsël Dene are pioneers in the land conservation movement, and what can TNC learn from this process, especially when it comes to, say, like decision making when it comes to land protection?
I think that they are, like so many things, they've built their success by watching, listening, dialoguing, learning from others who have been in a long line of communities and Indigenous people in Canada and across the world. And this mechanism of the establishment agreement and the work that they did building up to that time or up to that point really was to clarify roles, to clarify responsibilities, to clarify definition of terms. And some of the things, the dispute resolution mechanisms, the management board that's being formed now between the co-governing partners, the 3 co-governing partners, that will address the daily ins and outs of management of a permanently protected area, has been articulated in a way that other agreements, they built on those agreements. So it's pushing. The Northwest Territories just announced, the government of the Northwest Territories just announced that there is a new protocol in place, and they're going to treat, or they're going to start acting as in with the sense of all land and resource management decisions, treating Indigenous governments in the Northwest Territories with equal respect in that decision-making process. And so the Protected Areas Act, the mechanisms of establishment agreement are all in line with that protocol, and really pushed in many respects some of the mechanisms to get the Northwest Territories to that place too, to experiment and to know that they could do that effectively.
Awesome. And the second part of the question in terms of like how you think this could inform some of TNC's work going forward, especially when it comes to our land protection strategy.
Oh, well, most definitely. I mean, any place that people are desiring to engage, to be in a supportive role for a vision of land protection where Indigenous people are asserting their right to their traditional lands, that places like British Columbia, where the government of British Columbia has said they will legislate and implement UNDRIPs. These are big jobs. That's a lot of work to do. And so Łutsël has, embarked on that, and TNC can learn from some of them, the idiosyncrasies and some of the hardships and the struggles that have been overcome, and will continue to have to problem solve around on that regard.
Great. We got another question. Can you tell us a bit about the geology of the area?
Well, I'm not a expert today on the geology of the area, but what I can tell you that Łutsël sits on really, if you look at a geologic map of the east arm of Great Slave Lake, you will find this folding and melding of all these different layers. It's incredible. So I encourage everyone to type in geology of Great Slave Lake. But in the east arm specifically, it is very interesting. There is a trench underneath the east arm of Great Slave Lake that is 640 meters deep. That's 2,000 feet of fresh water sitting out in that east arm. People may or may not know that one of the most significant mining, staking rushes in North American recent history, at least the last 70 years, was right out Łutsël Dene First Nation's door. for diamonds and is rich with kimberlite pipes, which are the geologic formation that you find diamonds in, and they drill in a siphon fashion, like a cylinder fashion down. And so they have these open pit mines on the barren lands that contain incredible amounts of commercial grade diamonds, and they're mining out there as we speak. There's small cities on the tundra. So, and it's shield country, which is the oldest rock in the world. And that comes right kind of on the edge of Łutsël. Yeah, there's a lot to say about the geology of the area, to be honest, and the glaciation history and what we need to learn more about, and some of the work that will go on with Łutsël and its co-governing partners will be to uncover, explain, describe, and build awareness of these things coming into the future now that we have the area permanently protected, of which TNC will be a part of.
That's great. Now, speaking of the lake, we have a couple folks asking about what the species of fish were that were in the video.
Oh, that's fun. It's a fun question. The species of fish that were in that net were probably most likely whitefish. But lake trout, this is a really cold water habitat, incredible fish habitat, incredible cold water fishery. The immense amount of fish, and large fish, like giant lake trout. The Frontier Fishing Lodge, which you saw in one of the slides, has continually over the years had these, world-class record-breaking, lake trout that have been caught, in the East Arm from that, of visitors to that lodge. And there's really experienced and super expert fishermen in Łutsël. So those are two of the species. Suckers, what is known as jackfish, could have been in that picture as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And I think we're gonna have to end with that fun question because we're running out of time, unfortunately, today. But I just want to end with asking, is there one last message you'd like to leave our audience with today?
Gosh, I think maybe the message is that we've just embarked on this journey. It's been a lot of hard work leading up to this moment where the vision of protection has been realized. But the story is not ending here. The story has just begun, because this is a story of an amazing place and a beautiful place. But it is also a story about people that have not been able to participate or be understood and acknowledged for the stewards and the beholders with a rich, detailed knowledge of a place to participate in the co-governance. And that's going to take work to ensure the success of their ability to meaningfully, bring their knowledge to the fore in this co-governing relationship. It's going to be new, so we need to support that, and I believe we will. So I think that's the important thing. The implementation of these things is just begun.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. If folks are interested on getting updates on TNC's work in Canada, what's the best way that they can do that?
They should go to Nature United or nature.org. There's a incredible amount of information on that. And I'd also put out there that the Łutsël Dene First Nation has their own website. It's landoftheancestors.ca. And those two places are very good. And followers of Instagram and Facebook can find our handles on those as well. And we often retweet lots of things from Łutsël Dene First Nations social media accounts, so they can follow that way as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for spending your time with us today. And thank you to everyone who tuned in for your support of the Nature Conservancy. Your support is what makes all of this work possible. And I'm sorry if we didn't get to all of your questions today, but we will be sending everyone a follow-up email over the coming days with links to the resources that Tracey mentioned and a recording of the webinar. If you're enjoying the webinar, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I didn't say thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. And we'd love to come back and tell you more about fish habitat and geology and youth in the future. Yeah. So there's lots to say.
Yeah,
so,
it's definitely not all of the story.
No doubt.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tracey. For everyone watching, if you're enjoying the webinars, please share them with your friends. You can find the Nature Conservancy in Massachusetts on social media at conserve_MA. And you can keep up with our work there as well and get updates on upcoming virtual opportunities to connect with us. And just to put in a plug for next week's webinar, it'll be December 17th at noon Eastern. We'll be talking about a fundamental strategy for tackling climate change. TNC in Massachusetts' very own Allison Bowden and Sarah Burns will discuss the types of nature-based solutions we're working on to implement in the state and beyond. You can find the latest webinar schedule and registration links at nature.org/MA webinars. Thanks again for joining us and hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon.